The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.
And you're very welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast. I'm Michael Glennon. I'm delighted to say we've got former Ireland head coach Eddie O'Sullivan and two-time Six Nations winner Fiona Hayes with us on the pod this afternoon. How are you doing, guys?
Good, Michael.
Great. Very good. We're going to look back over the Irish sides in the United Rugby Championship action later and look ahead to the weekend's games too. But we're going to kick off with the TikTok Women's Six Nations, which hopefully ushered in a new era for Irish rugby in the women's game of the country. We hope. We're just about over not qualifying for the World Cup, and we've got one review done, another review to come as well. We've got a new coach in Greg McWilliam and a new look team, it can be said. England, they're the favourites for the tournament. They scored 9 tries. They beat Scotland away, and France also got a bonus point, 39-6 at home to Italy. Ireland came very close to getting off to a winning start, but went down 27-19 to Wales at the RTÉ. Fiona, we might talk about what they could have done better in the game, but what are your positives from that match? What are your big pluses?
Yeah, there was loads of positives for the game, especially the first half. They can kind of be proud of how they played. I think the big issue, and I said it before the game, was their lack of power up front, especially against teams like Wales and France and England. They're really going to feel it. You know, they might, Italy and Scotland are kind of, they can move them around the park and maybe attack them elsewhere. But I think France and definitely we saw with Wales, their power off the bench was absolutely immense as well. So the positives, I suppose, was Greg McWilliam said he stalled out. He wanted to play quick breakdown, quick free-flowing rugby. We saw a lot of that. He likes to keep the ball alive. Definitely that beautiful try by Linda de Jong, offload by Sam Monaghan was absolutely brilliant. So while there was really, really good parts, there's definitely a lot to work on for this Irish team going forward to France.
Eddie, did you spot any green shoots there? What were the seeds that you saw that would give you hope?
Yeah, I thought some of the rugby in the first half, particularly when they had more possession, was very good. You can see what they're trying to do, which is a good starting point, and I think that will get better over time. It might be tougher to play like that against a stronger team because you won't get the same amount of possession, possibly won't get the same amount of time and space on the ball, and they might find it a bit harder. But I think they're going the right direction there. But for me, I thought the defence was outstanding. I think that just their organisation was really good along the line. They were smart around the rucks when they put 1 or 2 into the breakdown. And I thought their physical commitment was outstanding. The physicality they brought against a very powerful Welsh team, to me, was outstanding. Probably in the end, what got them was that, when a team's that powerful, it's very hard to stop them all or to pick and drive near the line, which really was probably the thing that got Wales over the line. But I thought the first half, particularly when we were fresh, we saw some really good line breaks because players hit really good lines. So the positives were, I agree with Fiona, the attack looks really nice. It's work in progress, but it's getting there. But I thought for me, the defence, given that they were up against a powerful team, was outstanding. They really put their bodies on the line. And again, that will improve as well as time goes on. And
I suppose in the past, we've had problems maybe with skill issues, catch pass and that, but the try that Linda scored, and even Emer Considine passed to set Stacey away for that other one, and Amy Lee's try as well, all showed that even with limited possession, there is something there, a genesis to build on.
Yeah, and I think, what you have to be with that attack, and we've seen the men's team probably being less so, is patient. You've got to trust the system that you're not going to get a line break off every phase, and it might take 2 or 3 phases to set up a line break. But the patience to keep the ball, and that means 2 things: not forcing passes or offloads that are on down that you think might be on, like a low percentage offload or low percentage pass, and that's hard at times because you're working so hard to get a half break or something. You force one that's not really there because you think it's on. That's the first thing. And the second thing, you've got to be very precise around the rucks. You can't go to 5 rucks and do a really good job, and then the 6th one, somebody doesn't show up or you miss a clean out. So the patience around keeping your shape, not forcing the game, and being precise at the rucks allows you to build the pressure you need. And then eventually, the other team will crack and you get your hands free at a tackle, or you get a small overload, or you get a mismatch and off you go. So that takes time to develop, because that's confidence in the system. The more confidence we become in the system, the less likely we are to force the thing, because it's okay. If we don't get the line break now, it'll happen 2 rocks time. So I'm not going to turn the ball over or risk turning the ball over,
Yeah, and Fiona, you were probably disgusted with Linda's try because it was a sidestep from a prop about 5 yards out when the line was there begging, and for some reason she decided to throw in a sidestep. But actually, wonderful skills for the 3 tries we did see.
Yeah, the tries were really good, and Linda's step absolutely filthy, lovely to see. But I think it was the Sam Monaghan offload just before that was just so good, and it shows kind of their mentality. It's probably a different mentality before. It's that keep that ball alive. Obviously, Eddie talked about when it's not on, but she had gotten her hand free. She could see Linda making that line, so that was like probably a 70-80% chance, and they took it and they executed really well. Tries were really good. I thought Stacey's skip pass, she's obviously in the 7th circuit, really good skill set. I think we talked before and you mentioned it there about the skills set not being up to scratch, but I think that was skills under pressure, and it was through lack of game time, and the players mentioned that themselves, that going into those competitions they probably hadn't played enough games or gelled well together. So these girls have been playing in the 7th circuit, they've been playing with their clubs in the IL, and they looked fresh, probably not as gelled as we'd like to see because they'd only 3 weeks in camp together, but that will come. We need the patience. That will all come down the line. These games will stand to them. There's nothing to really play for in this Six Nations. Obviously you'd want to win it, but in reality you're looking at England and France at the minute. So he gets a chance to test out a few people. We saw Nicole Cronin in at 10. We saw the centre partnership of Stacey and Eve Higgins. So there's really good things there. We spoke about France as well, and something that I was kind of disappointed in the game, lots of positives, but was that bite at the rock going for the poach. It's something that, especially I think there was about 6 minutes left on the clock, Ireland were only down by 4 points. So while their defence was really good, and they let Wales have that ball. When you're down, when you've 4 minutes left, you need to be hungrier at those rucks. And I think Greg spoke about it afterwards as well. So that's something easily worked on. They have the ability to poach, and he's worked on defence. Now it's up to that decision making and trying to get those turnovers, because they only had 32% possession for the whole game.
That's right. And I spoke to Peter Bracken and Lynn Cantwell and James Kennedy, who was over Rugby United New York, and they were just telling me, I got the sense that Greg does things his own way. He's not a typical type of coach. Eddie, what's your take on that? He seems to be very holistic. Didn't talk about his key performance indicators. Said he's not interested in those, or he didn't set himself a target of X amount of wins this championship. How far is that okay at the start of a tenure, or how far will that carry you in international rugby?
I know everyone likes to talk about wins and targeting games, but I think you target every game, but you target to play the best you can play in that game. And if you're better than the opposition and you play to your potential, you should win the game. And if you don't play to your potential, you can possibly lose it. And even if we put in a storming performance against France, we may still not win the game, but you still go out with the intention of doing lots of things well that's within your control. So you'd like to see this step up on the defense again, step up on the attack, all those things. So you're never going to focus on wins as a coach, because they're out of your control. You could have a fantastic performance and you get a bad refereeing decision or a bad bounce to the ball and there's the win gone. So it's never a good idea. But I think what he can focus on, and what every coach will do now at the top of the game, is just focus on the things you can control, like your set piece, your ball retention, your defense. What do we need to do with those in those particular moments? So I think he's got a clear view on what he wants. So going back to his own overarching style, every coach will have their own blueprint of how they want to play the game. And that's going to be tempered by the players at your disposal. You've got to first assess what's our strengths and weaknesses. But he obviously has a very clear vision of how he wants to play. And you ask yourself the question, can you see his stamp on the team? And I think already you can see his stamp on the team. Do they have it done perfectly? No. But who would expect that in the first game out? So I think, I can see what his stamp is on that team, and it will become stronger and stronger as they go. So I think he from that point of view, he knows exactly what he wants and what he's trying to achieve. And he's been open about it. He says he wants to play a style of rugby, but I don't even need to do that. Just let the performances speak for themselves. And as long as they're playing to their potential, That's all you can do as a coach, and that's all they can do as a team. But if they do that, they'll get better and better, and the success will come. But Fiona's right. You've got to be realistic where we are. If we were to turn over France or England, this championship would be a huge shock. But there's still plenty to play for. Even if we don't win those games, it's how we deliver our performances within those games under huge pressure. And if we play well and still don't win the game, that's a really good positive for us against teams of that caliber.
And Fiona, do you see any, briefly, do you see any quick fixes? Because France are not going to be any less powerful than Wales, plus they will have their speed on the outside as well. Is it a game of containment? I know we were talking about putting out your best performance, but equally, I think we conceded 50 odd points last year, 7 tries against France. That's not great either for confidence.
No, and a quick fix would be maul defense. I mean, looking at it, I reviewed the clips afterwards. It was non-existent. You either stop at its source. I mean, the second try off a maul, they went up in the pod they didn't even go up at the pod at the front, but they were so separated that by the time they got around to Wales, they'd already shifted right and had got a drive on. So that's all very fixable. 3 weeks, as I said, in camp, they mightn't have had much time together to work on that. So that's definitely something. I think the scrum, I thought Nicole Cronin got, a sloppy ball at times, and we were overturned a couple of times. We were blitzed by the Welsh scrum on their ball a couple of times, which in turn gave them penalties. So that was a height issue. You can work on that. And I think going into a France game, Greg has his view of how he wants to play the game, and we saw it, and he likes to go wide and he likes to keep the ball alive. But there's definitely one thing you can't do, and it's give the ball back to that French back three a lot. So if we're kicking, if we're getting out of, it has to go off the pitch or it has to go to the sidelines, because Eddie spoke about the defense, and it's really, really good, but the French can sting you from anywhere. They're like the men's team. They'll attack from anywhere. They've silky skills. Might have been up to scratch against Italy at the weekend, and they still won by how many tries, but they're definitely someone. And in Toulouse, with that cauldron and everyone shouting and roaring, it's going to be a place. So I think Ireland need to be very clever what to do with the ball, how they retain it, holding on to it, and at times, as I spoke about that ruck, slowing it down a little bit as well. The French don't like that, so they need to get stuck in there. And that's not all about big and bulk. You can get stuck in anywhere. It just means that warrior in you comes out and you're going and you're slowing that ball down, because you do not want to give them fast ball. Greg
McWilliams mentioned it after about how far Wales have come on in the 12 months from last year when we beat them well. Fiona Coughlin said on Against the Head that maybe they weren't as bad as they were last year, but this certainly would have been boosted by the contract situation. So they got 12 full-time contracts, 12 part-time contracts, and I know they've only had a little bit of time to bed that in, but from a psychological point of view and a morale point of view, that's a good thing. Now, I'm going to throw this out there, and you can both shoot me down about how silly this is, but if the IRFU turned around tomorrow and said, next year we're going to offer 12 full-time contracts, how would that impact on the grassroots of rugby? So you're working in grassroots women's rugby, Fiona. So imagine if the girls could see that, how many more people would come in if they had this carrot of a clear pathway to a professional contract? Because you can see in Gaelic games, there's a lot of women going over to the AFLW because they can see that forward. So I don't really see the either or. I understand about getting the grassroots structures in place and the domestic game, but imagine if you combine the two, how many more women could you keep in the game, 15, 16, 17, if there was a pro contract and even the boost that we saw Wales got?
Yeah, and that's the main goal. It's probably not sustainable right now. You would have some players still working. There's a lot of issues outside of that. I think like Ireland had 6 sevens players as well on that squad, so they're fully contracted. Like they're training every day. But that carrot about getting people there, that's what you want. You want to be a professional rugby player. Everyone is working. They're going up to camp. They're trying to get back to work, and it's just a reality of what it is right now. And I think grassroots, if there was a clear pathway and you were building up, you were getting to that Munster stage or Ulster, Leinster, Connacht, and then you're kicking on and you're trying to get a contract. I think it's definitely the way the game needs to go. And we saw at Wales. Now, there was a lot of stuff going on in the background, but the one thing about Wales in last year's Six Nations was they looked completely unfit. They looked unstructured. They looked like they didn't want to play for each other. This was a different team. And I think that fitness of training every day, we saw it. We saw the power. We saw the bench come on. Donna Rose came on, made a massive impact. So it's definitely something you want to attain to, and it's somewhere Irish rugby should be looking at. Maybe not right now, but definitely in the future.
Eddie, what's your take on that? Is it feasible? Like, I think, click your fingers, a big shock. IRFU announced 12 contracts next year, and the boost it gives to across the country for younger players coming through.
Yeah, I think it's a good target for young players to see a career in rugby. The other thing is, how lucrative can you make it? Because like most of these players have good careers as well outside of rugby. I mean, are you going to give up a career in finance or in medicine or in law to take up a contract that pays less? That's, you've got to be realistic as well. So you've got to make it worth their while. The other thing is, the question is, if someone's a professional rugby player in Ireland, where do they play every week except at club level? They're not going to be playing a professional game. I think that's the big turning point, is when they can access a professional game. So in the men's game, if you're a professional rugby player, you play at one of the provinces professionally, and you train every day with the province, and then you play with Ireland. So that environment is perfect for you to become the best you can be. The big turning point for a player on the Irish women's team is to get contracted over in England. That's a big turning point for them, and then they're in a professional environment every day. So the key isn't so much how I put it, that you're being paid to play, which is great, and that means you can focus solely on that. But where is your daily routine? Is it in a professional environment? So, like, if you play some of the Irish players at the moment, and they're still training with their club two nights a week, and are still training with the provinces, they're financially better off, but it doesn't change the professional environment they're in, and that's the big catalyst. So ideally, in the perfect world, we'd have a professional women's rugby league in Ireland, and as Fiona says, it's hard to see how that would function at the moment. But I think it's the environment and the access to that professional environment on a daily basis, the real catalyst. But having said that, it's never a bad thing for players to be able to embrace that and take it on, if we can make that happen. So I'm not sure how that would work at the moment in Ireland, but certainly, I mean, if you look at the model in Argentina they used back in the late 90s and into the noughties, which created that famous Argentinian team that was hugely successful. They got third in the World Cup in 2007. What they did is they basically had their players, they focused on getting them into professional environments overseas. And when Argentina used to have their international training camps, they had them in France, because they had something like 60 or 70 players in France. So probably at the moment, the best way forward is for us to get players overseas if possible, because they bring that professionalism background. It's not a nice thing to have to say, because we went through that ideation in the men's game years ago and it was never really looked upon. But unless you can create that environment, that professional environment day to day for everybody, it's hard to see a massive benefit immediately out of it. It's never a bad thing though to invest in to invest financially on the game.
Yeah, so the Field of Dreams will have to wait for another little while. And when you mentioned the sevens there, Fiona, at the moment it's okay, but later on there's going to be a clash. I mean, the IRFU is in a bit of a conundrum here, because all the attention is on the 15s from the two reviews that went on. And I'm just wondering, if we're working in rugby at some level over the last 30 or 40 years, myself and Eddie anyways, but how do you explain to the casual viewer for the Scotland match that there's a sevens tournament on in Canada, that you could be missing your star players like Bavian Parsons and Stacey Flood? And what does that say about their attitude to the Six Nations? Because the Irish people, the Irish sports fan can relate to the Six Nations, has grown up with it, or the Five Nations. What did they do there? How do you sell sevens without saying, like, you will know us by our actions? The actions is we will remove some of our best players for a Six Nations match. How do they balance that up?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I suppose money is what it comes down to. I mean, they're like, the sevens are funded, it's Olympic sport. That's why they get money from Sport Ireland.
But sell that to a casual fan who has never seen sevens, or very rarely, and it's a thing that's not close to their heart. There's not a tournament in Dublin every year. So sell it. We understand the logistics and the money and the pathways and the funds that go with it, but sell it to me as somebody who wants to get into the women's rugby game.
As in, what's good about sevens?
As a fan, no. As a fan, tell me. Why should I take the IRFU's new attitude to the 15s game serious if they're going to take away
Right. So yeah. So look, they've always set their stall early. You know, there's two teams in this country. The sevens, those sevens girls want to play sevens. They want to be competing. They're paid athletes to play at the sevens levels. So the RFU obviously have taken them out, and there's a great setup. I know Aidan McNulty is over. So there's a great bond between, you know, you can hear Greg and Aidan. They've really worked hard together to get the best out of these players. So from the start of the Six Nations, it's been known that these girls will be gone for the last two games. It's selling it to the team was the first thing, because that wasn't what was done in the past. They've sold it to the team, and you know, everyone's aboard, and I think it's a good opportunity to test the squad and test outside that. So the likes of Stacey Flood, there was a lot of, we saw now that Greg obviously as an out half, she was there, but we know she's going for two games. So Greg has his trust in Nicole Cronin. He said, look, I'm going to give this girl, she's going to be around for the 5 games. Hopefully we'll see her playing in all the 5 games, and she gets game time. So it's just, you have to understand that it's a separate game, but they're training in that environment. That's their game. So as a 15s, that's all we know. That's what we love as Irish people. That's what we watch. We adore the 15s game. I certainly do as a prop. I could never understand that 7th thing, but it's there. It's a game. They want to compete for Olympics. They have their own circuit. They have their own World Cup, and it's a World Cup they're going to. So for them, that's their focus, and they can switch their focus to 15s rugby. And Greg has done it really well. He's told them they need to go out and play in the 15s AIL League in Ireland, and they've done that. So he has kind of sowed the seed in, and I think it's that communication from the start that's saying, look, we're here for 3 games. These girls will be involved. They're gone. We have the players now. They'll get a chance to come in and step in and have a go as well. Yeah.
Eddie, will we ever love 7s the way we love 15s?
I doubt it, because culturally we're more attracted to the 15s game here. 7s is a completely different product altogether. I think one of the problems there, if you have as well, is that you have, you know, a limited amount of talent at the moment. Like, so they've got to use that wisely. They're getting funding, we know, from the government. But I think the eye and the prize here as well, I think maybe that could be a game changer if Ireland went to the Olympics and won a medal at 7s. And that's the ultimate. What they're trying to do here is, it's difficult, as Fiona says, it's a balancing act between the public profile, you're right, is definitely on the 15s. But if the 7s were to win a medal at the next Olympics, that would be a game changer for us. And then you could see why people might go, okay, we can only do it every 4 years, but the work has to go in during that 4 years, and a lot of it is unseen, because it's the way of tournaments we don't even follow. So that's the kind of the selling point, but you have to start somewhere. And I suppose the RFU have put their hands in, we got that balance wrong in the last while, but it is a difficult one, and it's contentious when you're a 15 supporter, but you see the bigger picture here as well.
We'll just switch to the United Rugby Championship now. Quick recap of the weekend's results. Munster hammered Benetton 51-22. Ulster thought had beaten the Stormers. There was a late disallowed try that the referee's boss subsequently admitted should have stood. Unusually enough, that was 23-20. And Leinster ran out 45-8 winners over Connacht. We were talking to Dan McFarland and Robin McBride on Monday. They were talking about the merits of trialling a 20-minute red card, as they're doing in Super Rugby at the moment, because we've seen Jaime Faiva for Italy, Charlie Ewells for England, and then Tom Daly at the weekend, and also Tommy O'Brien got sent off early on. I was looking back, the new tackle protocol, the framework came in, it was trialled in 2018 and 2019 at Under-20s World Cup. So we're kind of 3 years into this system now, where it's been known about how you're supposed to tackle and what are the sanctions if you don't do it correctly, but we're still seeing a lot of incidents. How do you balance up the thing of spoiling the game, which is rubbish, with player safety, which is the priority, but is there something worth trialing if we can see 3 years down the line, players are not changing their behaviours, Eddie?
Well, I think this idea we're changing players' behaviours is going to happen. But the notion that we will change players' behaviours to the point where there'll be no high tackles is ludicrous. Because when I look at the game now, most of the red cards you see, and some of them are very harsh and some of them are nailed on, most of the red cards you see are for 2 reasons. Complete accidents, and there's been a lot of those, and we say, well, that's not a mitigation. It happens, it happens. So accidents don't get you out of jail on that. And the second thing is, players being sloppy and lazy with their setup in the tackle, like staying too high, not getting their arms up. you rarely now see in rugby someone taking somebody out, like with a nasty tackle. But we still have to have that there. That still has to be, you know, if you take a player out with a nasty high challenge, there's no excuse for it, then there has to be a red card. I actually think the solution here is actually available if they'd only just open their eyes. And I think they should look at the GAA for this. And I think the black card, to me, is the solution to this. And it's the way I would adjudicate on it is that the old days are red cards for somebody like do something really egregious, like punching somebody or kicking somebody or taking somebody out with an elbow. And there should be a red card for that. So if someone does something that's dangerous in the game, reckless, crazy, red card, end of story, and play with 14 men, and that's it. And I think that there's so little of that now. It doesn't really happen. Professionals respect each other. Players respect each other. They don't go out to hurt each other. That game's gone out of the game. But the next thing is, I believe, is a black card, which the GAA have. It's very simple. If you have a high challenge and a player gets head-to-head contact and it's an accident or it's not a, you know, terribly egregious, you give a black card, and that should be maybe 20 minutes, and then replace the player
with a different player.
Yeah, you have subs.
Yeah,
that's it. Now, what that would do is it would say that you pay if you're reckless, if you're careless in a tackle, or you end up accidentally, giving away a penalty for a high challenge, you go in the bin for 20 minutes and then somebody else replaces you. So it doesn't completely, like we had in Galway and we had in Twickenham, teams playing with 14 men for nearly 80 minutes.
Yeah,
I think there's a proportionality. There has to be. The key thing about laws is when you put a law into the game, right? There's two things you've got to try and avoid. There's one, having anomalies around it. Anomalies that crop up all the time are not anomalies anymore. That's the key. So if there's an anomaly around every law and it's rare, you say, well, look, that's the way it is. And sometimes, if you touch a guy's boot in the air, it's still a penalty, even though you didn't spin him around in the air. So that's the first thing. There's no anomalies, and there's proportionality about the penalty. So I think that black card is a proportionality thing. Is that if it's not egregious, if it's not intentional, and you could decide what that is, very easily. But it's just intentional and it's egregious, it's red. And if it's unintentional or it's not that egregious, go to black, which could be 20 minutes, and then that player is replaced by another player off the bench. And that, to me, is proportional around what's happening at the moment.
I guess that was kind of one thing that was cited. Craig Gilroy, when he was sent off against the Scarlets, that Dan McFarland was saying he didn't actually look as if he did a lot wrong. It was a speedy thing, and Tom Rogers had fallen into his tackle, and had he not fallen into that tackle, nobody would have paid any attention.
And that's the mitigation stuff that you can go through, and that's fair. Yeah. But I think in their and let's be honest here, the World Rugby, it's very easy to start shouting and roaring and pointing fingers. Oh, this is ridiculous and it's ruined the game. But World Rugby are on a difficult mission at the moment to try and make the game safer. And it's very hard to make rugby safe because you have people running around at high speed, changing direction in a collision sport. Well, what could go wrong? Well, we see what goes wrong.
A lot.
A lot can go wrong, and nobody intends it. And I do believe that the nastiness that used to be a part of rugby, what red cards were for, punches and kicks and elbows and cheap shots, doesn't exist anymore. And I mean, all the proposed fights we see I say it's just lapel shaking. Everyone's shaking each other's lapels. Nobody throws a punch. Who's stupid enough to throw a punch? So I think they need to find that sweet spot that's proportional around these events. And players are trying to, they are trying to adjust, but it's very hard to legislate for the game we're playing, and it's getting quicker and it's getting more physical. So I think they need to find, and I think for me, looking at Gaelic football, and people criticize that, but I think in rugby that could be a reasonable solution to a difficult problem.
Yeah, and especially the tour happened so early, Fiona, in the last few matches that we've seen. What's it like in the dressing room before? Like, I was never in a dressing room where we weren't told about get a first hit in early and hammer them or that. Is that the same for the women's rugby? Are you take your woman out nice and early and let her know?
That's it. It is. It's like you're pumped up, you're inside, or you're, as a coach, you're trying to get everyone up to that. But it's finding that balance of levels of aggression. Before, said that we saw in the England game, obviously maybe Eddie Jones had them pumped up to the max, and we saw that. But the thing is, Michael, as well, like you're looking at James Ryan. So you're going, okay, this guy's out for months, probably, you know, because someone's been reckless in their behavior. So I understand, you know, World Rugby and people are giving out about this and that. And to be honest with you, Frawley was lucky. Tom Daly came out, it looked like it was crazy high. Like, obviously he didn't mean it. He's not that type of player, but it was 100% correct. Frawley was lucky. He went on and won man of the match. But they've kind of set their stall. I know over in the Southern Hemisphere, they're obviously trying it. We saw Tom Banks at the weekend. He done an absolutely crazy hit as well for the Brumbies, was off for 20 minutes, and the Brumbies went on to win 39-38. Would that have been the cracking game if it'd been 14 men against 15? Maybe it wouldn't. You know, I know he was off for the 20 minutes. So there's loads of stuff, but I think Eddie nailed it on the head. I think it's that mitigation. I think the referees need to really look at that. If there's heights being dropped at times and they're still getting red cards, you know, or the players falling into the tackle. So for me, looking at that is the area they need to nail down. I'm not too sure if I'm keen on this red card. I think coaches really need to nail down getting lower in those. We're still seeing those high hits, trying to dislodge the ball. You know, maybe that needs to come out of the game. I know you want to stop offloads, but I think it's the referees that need to get the mitigation right, and we've just got to stick with it, because there's guys' careers being ruined for these shots, and although it's not done on purpose, it's still there, and guys are out for weeks, months at a time.
Okay, well, we've solved that problem anyways on the RTÉ Rugby podcast. No, I think World Rugby, they're going to have to work on that a bit more. Just the Ulster are playing the Bulls in Pretoria in South Africa, and they've Toulouse the following week. So you're going to imagine they would take that into account. The Munster are at home, obviously, to Leinster in the Derby. They're kind of funny games taking place before a round of the Champions Cup. What's the balance there again, Eddie, between making sure you go in on an up and holding back teams back for the more important tournament?
Yeah, and I think it is a bit of a balancing act, but I think Ulster are pretty safe in the URC in terms of that they're going to be able to get the home advantage in the playoffs. They're right up there, you know, in terms of they're second in the table. I think they might have a little bit of wriggle room. They're hardly going to slip out of the top four at the moment. So it gives them a little bit of wriggle room if they want it. But having said that, when you go down to South Africa, and they lost controversially last week, and again, not to talk over too much, it was a dreadful decision by the referee. The ball was obviously dislodged by the opposition player, and I thought it went backwards actually when he dislodged it. It didn't go forward. It went straight. Like I thought it was a try. No, it would have been a bizarre try, but that's the anomaly of it, you know. Yeah. So
you'll have to blame the TMO slightly there as well, because I think the referee was happy enough and your man jumped in.
Well, the referee, well, I would be tough on the referee and say, the TMO was there to help you, not to tell you what to do. So he should have been strong enough to say, listen, I hear what you're saying, but my read on this is different. I'm going to try. And that's a good referee. Well, and I've seen TMOs. I do think TMOs are not a bit of kick in the backside, because they do come in and try and influence the referee beyond their station, you know, and I think the referees are the referees. They're there in the middle. They make decisions. You can help them. That's what the assistant referees are there for. But they've got to make the call. I would say to the referee there, in retrospect, he had it back. He should have been stronger as a referee and said, look, I hear where you're coming from, but that's not what I'm seeing. I'm going to go with the try. Yeah. Now, it's easy to say that when you're sitting at your kitchen table in the morning, you know, playing Monday morning quarterback. But that's the tough part of refereeing, is trusting yourself under pressure. But anyway, look, that aside, Ulster's situation, they would be really sick losing that game, to no fault of their own, apart from the mistakes they made. But at the end of the day, it does put a bit of pressure on to get home from South Africa with something tangible. You saw Munster coming home with 2 away bonus point losses, you know, poor return for a long journey. So there's a bit of pressure on to try maybe get something out of the Bulls game, but they don't have to risk the URC to do that. They're in a good place. So the focus will be definitely on Europe. That for them is still a big carrot, because they're playing so well in Europe this year.
Yeah, they're away in Toulouse. And then just when you mentioned about the referee, I remember Wayne Barnes in the last Ireland match, twice the TMO came up to him and he told the TMO where to go, more or less.
And Barnes is strong, you know, that's his experience, he knows. Yeah, and the other referee, the referee has to believe they are the boss, and that's, even if they get it wrong, they've got to trust themselves, you know. But I thought, anyway, we were been through it, but it definitely, it's something that they need to look at again in terms of the management of the game, the referees, the TMOs and the ARs. You know, the TMO is only to offer advice and opinions, you know, not to make decisions or force them.
Yeah, the Munster-Leinster match is live on RTÉ on Saturday as well, Fiona. Again, what's your take on that in terms of Munster? They beat Leinster the last time out, I think, in the Rainbow Cup, and this is a rescheduled match. They're hoping for a big crowd. Damien Dialande talking, he's confirmed he's not going to be around next year. Like, this might sound a bit silly as well. Is you were seeing a more realistic target for Munster than Champions Cup?
Yeah, I think so. Right now. I thought at the start of the season that maybe this could be the year they might take the URC. You know, I think Leinster, obviously in the Champions Cup, are very strong. This game's actually funny as well, Michael, because you have internationals coming back. So do you want to integrate them into the squad to get a bit of game time before the Champions Cup games? You know, Munster are away to Exeter as well, so you would imagine that a few of the guys will be trying to get them some game time. I think it's a tough ask for Leinster to come down to Thomond Park. Well, that's what I feel, because obviously I'm living over the road. But it's going to be a good game. But I think Munster could take this one.
A quick verdict from you, Eddie, on that one.
It's a hard one to call, because I think Leinster will want to get some rhythm back into their game. Like, they've been playing without their team pretty much through the Six Nations. So Leinster might load up, and they know going to Limerick that if they don't load up properly and get their head in the game, they will get a good kicking. I think Munster will go out strong as well, because a lot of the players that they've been away have not been really heavily invested in the Six Nations to be coming off the bench, and that they haven't a lot of miles on their clock over the last few weeks. So it'll be full on, there's no doubt about it. But I think maybe Munster needed the result a little bit more than Leinster at this point. So maybe that might tip it in their favour at home and with a big crowd.
Very good. Okay, it's a bumper Saturday for rugby on RTÉ with Benetton v Connacht, Munster v Leinster live on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player, and the Irish Derby is also live. Sorry, the Irish Rugby Derby is also live on RTÉ Radio 1. France v Ireland in the Women's Six Nations has a 2:15 kickoff live on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player, also live on the radio on Saturday Sport. We'll have a live blog and post-match reaction on the website as well. Thanks a million to Fiona and to Eddie for joining. Enjoy the rugby, and we'll chat to you next week.
The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.